we have about 30 minutes left, so I really want to make the most of it before lunch is served and people start to disappear. So I want to throw out some questions to the panel. We heard your life stories. They were sort of moving and interesting and challenging and everything you can think of. We've recovered in a way from acromegaly, and my key issue is always how can you improve your quality of daily life, right? Apart from the surgery and the medicine, what is there that you do in your life that makes your life better as if it's a normal life? So I want to ask each of you, can you share some advice that you do that you say, hey, that made a real difference in the way I live my life in a normal way, even though I have acromegaly? Who wants to kick off? JD?
Sure. The first thing is not to let the disease define me, and find something to do to make a difference. And I was lucky enough to find an idea like pituitary wellness to dedicate my time to, and I was able to do it. Like I was saying, I spend a lot of my professional time on it to try to make it better. So, and beyond the my work, I try to not pay that much attention to it. I don't know if that makes sense. I have, unfortunately, to deal with joint issues, but I try to maintain a healthy lifestyle. I try to exercise as much as I can, nutrition, and have all the other interests that I always had, music and art and things like that. So, but not really. I feel the longer from diagnosis, the less I feel like a patient, and more. I don't know if that makes it more like a normal person. And I would encourage you all to do that, to try to just go, we live with this and it's chronic, and get on with things. So.
Great. Dan?
Yeah, I would echo that. I don't really think about it, to be perfectly honest. I might knock a bottle of wine over now and again when I can't see it, but it is. I think looking after yourself is the key. I don't expect everyone to be running marathons, but some, apart from that lady there who loves doing it, but she's a sadist, but that's up to her. But we don't all have lots of energy, but some small bits of exercise. I do think diet is a fundamental. And, we like to eat, I tend to find, acromegalics, and I think our medication can often affect our intake. I know my testosterone, about 2 weeks after my testosterone injection, I can eat non-stop. Just because I can doesn't mean I should, and that's kind of a difficult internal battle sometimes. I think it's trying to look after yourself as best you can, and also do the things you love. I like writing music, and I love photography, though it's not a career. I love going out. I still go clubbing. I don't care. So do the things you like, and to try and live life as best you can.
Santino?
I think, like Dan, I don't think about it every single second of the day, but I accept the fact that it is actually literally a part of me. And work, I use work as a distraction, but I remember growing up and as an adolescent and in my early 20s, always saying, I just want to be able to contribute. I want to be able to, when I'm hopefully when I'm 90 and I die, I want to be able to say I contributed to life. I want to be remembered by saying that I did this to help someone else. So for me, it's like work is a distraction, but having what I have and knowing it's a part of me, and being able to help others see the way I see, that's how I deal with it.
I could just add that I'm half Italian, so I can say this. The Italians say something, it's called la dolce far niente. I don't know if you know what it means, but it means the sweetness of doing nothing. And the Italians are very good at this. And it's just about just enjoying life, enjoy the stuff that's around you, and going to a coffee shop and having coffee and striking out a conversation with somebody you don't know. Take a bike ride and don't think about it. Just go and enjoy it. And it's really good advice. There's absolutely no scientific evidence to say that it's good for you, but I promise you it is. So do more of that.
Yeah. I think I can echo that, because I stopped drinking for 6 or 7 years thinking that I would feel better, but it didn't have much of an impact. So I'm back to drinking wine again. That's true. It's true.
My name's Peter and I'm a drinker.
So,
Smoking.
So, what was one of your biggest frustrations or biggest struggles, and how did you overcome it?
Oh boy, that's a good question. So many.
Whoever wants to go first.
I think the biggest thing for me was not the disease itself, was that getting people who don't have acromegaly to get it. And I know all of you probably understand that. I think that's still the hardest thing for me. People just don't get it. Why aren't you answering your phone? Why are you sleeping? Why, you just don't get it. They think that just because I look fine, I'm okay. That's the hardest thing for me.
I think, what was my biggest frustration? Probably two things. One was knowing something was wrong with me, but not knowing what it was. And no one being able to tell me what that might be. And, I said when I discovered what it was, it's like a huge relief. So that's a frustration. I think, again, I don't think this is unique to the UK, but the lack of, sometimes the slow process of diagnosis and appointments. And what, I used to worry that they say, well, we'll see you in 3 months. And you sort of think, well, no, hold on, I'm iller than that. I should be next week. But actually, if they think 3 months, then maybe you're not as ill as you think you are. And you've got to go with the knowledgeable opinions of the medical teams. But we still have a lack of teams and experts talking to each other. And I think that's the frustration. And I know we spoke a lot about that yesterday. Yeah. But that's a wholesale change that's got to happen, but it will.
Yeah, I agree with that. To me, that was a big frustration for me. Trying to coordinate everybody that was caring for you, and you be the one that has to do it. There's a certain amount of that we have to do, but that is when you go to a doctor visit and but we don't have that MRI now, or we don't have that. Well, or we're going to do the whatever blood test for the third time because this is the third guy that saw you. And now, so can't you just ask the other doctor? So all of that inconsistency, and thankfully I think that's getting better, at least in the U.S. with when you go to a center, there's usually an internist that is like the quarterback that looks at everything. And the last visit that I had with that doctor was very productive. And they had a very good idea of what my conditions were and what needed to be done next, and that doctor takes care of that. So I think if we can move medicine more that way, it would be helpful for everybody.
Can I just give one example? So when I had my angiogram to look at the vascular situation around my brain prior to surgery, when I came out of the angiogram, I had a really tight chest, and the consultants wanted to keep me in overnight, and after an echo, they discovered I had this leaking heart valve. So I had to go and see a cardiac specialist who had to give the all clear for me to have anesthesia for the transphrenoidal surgery. So I'm sat in his office, and we're talking and chatting, and he says, well, I think I can possibly give you the all clear, but it's going to take me about 3 months to get the letter to your team. And we were like, What? 3 months? That'd be ridiculous. And it just so happened that the secretary of my endocrinologist was walking past and overheard the conversation and basically said, no, it's all right, I'll give him a phone call now and let him know. So it went from 3 months to 30 seconds just because she was fortuitously in the same place. Why that whole system can't be tightened up is just beyond me. We need pages back again.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, are there some questions from the floor? I think Garnett is ready to walk around with the microphone, so anyone has a question? Kathy? That's easy. Yeah.
Santino, you mentioned like not answering your phone. Do you think that's fatigue, depression? On a daily basis, do you still feel fatigued? And your IG levels are under control?
Recently, I feel a lot better because my IGF-1 has been normalized, but that's extremely recent. I mean, that's just one example, not answering my phone, that people, like, they just don't get it. You know what I mean? It is fatigue for the most part. It's fatigue. Because I was just telling Charity yesterday that when I was on Sandostatin, like, it was insane how depressed I got. And I would tell my GP, like, this is not me at all. And I know that it's not me, and I recognize that it's not me, because I'm, like, always super cheerful and excited, and so I know, like, to recognize the signs, and I know that it's fatigue, and I really love sleeping sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, but people just don't get it. They think that because I'm all like, that means I don't get tired.
Even with our growth hormone levels, though, it's your new normal. It might not be your normal growth hormone levels.
Right.
We don't know whether they're normally you would be 50 or 180. So we still don't know what normal feeling would be. With
Exactly.
That.
Yeah.
It's just within therapeutic range for.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very true. We have Dr. Blevins talks about acromegaly as a individual disease, and he says that there can be 150 people with acromegaly in one room and 150 different disease states that are completely different from one another, and that's so true. And it should be true with the way doctors approach our condition.
And it's more about how we feel, not what our numbers are.
Correct. And your quality, what do you do with it? You feel better, you do more things.
I feel kind of, I don't know, I feel kind of not heard because my numbers are good, but
Yeah.
should I be feeling better?
Sure.
Paula, I think you had a question.
This is actually a question for Dan. So, Dan, for years I've been talking about writing a book.
Yes.
And I talk and I talk and I talk, and I'm a pretty good talker. How do I do that? You've got a ghostwriter?
Well, I charge £30 an hour consultancy fee, so we can.
Okay.
No, I'm only joking. I'm only
Later.
joking. I'm only joking.
Just do it.
Yeah, it is okay. We were chatting about this last night, and there's the old adage, everyone has a story in them. Well, I think with acromegalics, it's definitely true. And it doesn't always have to be a written story. It could be it's very easy to make audiobooks now. And some people like to hear a patient story, and there's no one's going to tell the story better than your voice. But as for actually kind of constructing a book, I mean, the first thing I did was write a timeline of events. I spoke to my family, especially the early years, which I couldn't remember a lot of, sort of the 3- and 4-year-old stuff, and sort of mapped out what I thought was the key bits. And then I got all my medical records from all the hospitals, and that filled in some other bits too. And then I honestly just started writing. And that was it. And I used to set myself 15 minutes every morning at 9 o'clock, a countdown timer. And when 15 minutes was up, if I hadn't done anything, I've only lost a quarter of an hour. But if I'm on a roll and I'm still writing, that timer can go off and I'm going to keep writing. So writers work in different ways. Creativity is a very difficult thing. And sometimes, when you have a condition like ours, creativity doesn't flow out of your pores, every day. So you have to work at it. And there were some weeks I wrote sod all, but there was other weeks I couldn't stop. I worked with a ghostwriter in the sense that he helped me shape it and edit it, but he didn't write a single word. And that was important. So
You actually did the writing.
yeah, and he just helped construct it. But there seems to be a couple of people interested in writing their stories, so maybe we need to get a little group together and start chatting and helping each other. But the industry is in such a healthy place for self-publishing. No big publisher is going to touch your story. I hate to tell you that right now. I went to the London Book Fair. This is how naive I was. I went to the London Book Fair with a little manuscript of like the first couple of chapters, no appointments with anyone, no agent, and I saw the Penguin stand, right? The biggest stand in the whole fair. So I thought, I'm just going to have a chat with Penguin. So I walked up to Penguin and I said, can I have a chat with someone? They're like, yeah, sure. Who's your agent? I don't have an agent. Yeah. Okay, well, when you got an agent, maybe come back. And that's it. And it's a horrible industry, really. But you have the power to self-publish. And I can help you with that.
Great.
I can give you a couple, just what Dan was saying. I've written some journal articles, 20, 30 pages, never a book. But a good editor is critical.
Yeah.
You can find somebody to look at your work and edit it. I was amazed. I thought I could write pretty well when the editor got a hold of it. Without changing a word, just the way they arrange it and look at it from a different set of eyes for communication, it's very helpful. So that's number one.
One more question over there. Right.
Well, it might turn into a question. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to say or how to say this. But I continually run into patients who are depressed. And it's not something that's talked about much. And I've kind of alluded to it in some of my questions to the panel yesterday, et cetera. But I just want to make a couple of comments on the notion that it is entirely in your control as to how you feel. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it absolutely is not. Okay? You can't just put on a sunny face, a happy face, and say, all is well, I'm happy, I can do this. Sometimes you can. But in many cases, and it's episodic, it could be short-term, it could be long-term, but you do not always have control over where depression goes and where it takes you. And one of the books that I have, just for an illustration, if I can find it. Oh, here it is. They use an illustration on the front cover, which is either a tornado or a toilet bowl. But when you start circling the bowl, you're going to go down and down and down. And it is not in your control as to how far down you go and when you start crawling back out of the hole. So I think it's a very important subject because I think it affects more of us than not. And we have to encourage each other to get help. Okay? It's not always something you can do by yourself unless you're willing to just let life go by for however long it takes. I personally think there's some relationship between exposure to elevated levels of IGF-1, particularly over longer periods of time, as well as the constant dropping of little problems on your back. One more thing, one more thing, one more thing until you crash. At least that's my experience.
Well,
so I would encourage those of you who are experiencing that now, because you can't tell by looking at people, or have encouraged it in the past or will in the future, don't ignore it.
Yep.
Get help, because it just makes life unlivable. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you. I think that's a very important point to raise, and thank you. And any of the panel members want to jump in?
I would just add that you're absolutely right. There's a tremendous amount of need for emotional health and mental health issues in all pituitary disorders, particularly with acromegaly. And I can tell you that the information that we've published, it's been used and shared all over the place. It's not because it's great, but I can tell you there's very few people that are actually publishing and talking about emotional health and pituitary disease, particularly acromegaly. So I can tell you that the first time that we produced a podcast with Linda Ria, who's a Los Angeles-based behavioral scientist, it was amazing to watch the map light up for people downloading the podcast. It was a 20-minute podcast. It was like 4,000 hits in about an hour and a half. I thought we were going to crash. Honestly, I didn't know, I had no idea how many people could go on the site at the same time. And consistently, every time we publish a story, it gets the highest hits than anything else that we publish. So the need is out there. And it is not only the need for people to understand what you were just very well said, that we need to pay attention to it, but to also have more doctors recognize it and more behavioral scientists get involved. And like I was saying, and I think I mentioned in the presentation, there are opportunities, and a lot of these scientists think that there are diagnostic tools in the emotional health of people to say there are hormonal reasons for people to feel depressed or whatever the symptoms might be. So
Okay. I think there was one more question. We're running out of time, so.
So
Bella,
hopefully
go
a
for
quick
it.
one. So I don't know how many know, but we are in the process of redesigning the Acromegaly community website. So all the information that was there is so outdated. So I was wondering if there's things that we can share from the three of you or from anybody else that we can either link to or post to on the new site. So we're still kind of figuring out what some of the pages are going to look like. So one of the things will be the Faces of Hope. So that's where we're going to need the patient stories. So we'll need those, and then you guys can always contact me or email me if you have any ideas or suggestions or want to help update the site. Because right now it's probably just going to be me and maybe Tracy.
Okay.
So yeah, any like articles or anything that we can post, events happening worldwide, stuff like that. So if you guys can share, that would be awesome, especially articles. And
you can send
things
us a
like that.
link. So we
There was
can
one
link.
thing I was thinking about earlier on. So about the early diagnosis problem. There's lots of online support for people that have acromegaly. But I can't see anything out there at the minute for people that might want to find out if they have acromegaly, other than just reading a list of symptoms. And I was thinking whether there's the possibility to build a very simple site or an app, almost like an acromegaly checker, where you just answer a list of questions, look at some pictures. And it's not to diagnose you, because it's no AI can do that really. But if it's questions like, are you tired? Has your feet changed? Do you think you look different? Are your teeth hurting? Are your fingers hurting? If you have low libido, if all of these things sort of point to yes, then at some point somebody should say, not you have acromegaly, but go and talk to a doctor. Because to me, that's a really simple fix that we could build online as a resource that we could send friends to. We don't necessarily want to be the diagnosers. But if we could work with the Pituitary Foundation in the UK and the specialists around the world to try and come up with this conclusive sort of questionnaire checker to see how you feel, I think that would be a really useful resource.
And we're building that is in the process. So it is one of the things that it's one of the things that we're going to have on the website.
Okay.
So I can show you. So where we got the idea from is Michael J. Fox. His website has one. Do you think you have this? So,
but let's try and get one that all the websites and all the communities and all the support groups, so it's a global one-stop place that we all agree on, and that's the place that everyone gets sent to. And I see no reason why we can't do that.
So I've been trying really hard in Canada, and I'm very lucky to be.
Microphone.
I'm going to ask you to wait there.
Okay, so I've been lucky enough to meet people in the Parliament, and I just have casual talks with them. But every time I meet a new Parliament member, I am like, we need to upgrade our GPs when it comes to rare diseases. How do we do this? By saving money. And they're like, I said, why can't we have our new GPs coming out of school right now having to do a year with the older GPs? Because they can give the new knowledge of rare diseases now that are updated to the old doctors, but the old doctors can teach the new doctors some old school stuff that'll benefit them. And I've been shut down every time. So I don't know, like, that I think would be a huge impact worldwide if they made that a mandatory thing to do.
Yeah.
So Deanna, now family physicians do have to do a fellowship.
Yeah, but they're not sometimes with the right. They're not sometimes with the right doctors.
Well,
They're getting together with the doctors that are doing in the same field as them. They need to do a year with the GPs. Not.
But that's what a family physician is a general practitioner. And so
Yeah.
the only physicians that can take on a family physician are assistant professors at the universities. So that's, if you're looking at doing something like that, that's where you have to go. You have to go to the medical division of the universities and talk to them.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay, I think we're coming to the end. Does any of the panel members want to add anything before I?
I just want to just reiterate, government's great, be your own advocate, and try and, I'm not saying forget government, but there's so much red tape with the likelihood of us doing anything. Support groups like this, organizations is where it's at, because at some point government will then look at that and go, okay, we got to listen.
Okay, I want to give a warm applause to the panel and thank them for the contribution.
Thank you.
So it's my honor to sort of wrap up everything, and I've got a few thank yous to say and a few things to remind you of. So first of all, feedback on the conference. There's this feedback form in your folder. Please fill it out and return it to me or Diana, because that helps us shape the next conference. And be honest, you know, and if you have suggestions or ideas, what was good, what was bad, anything that will help us sort of evaluate and get better at it while we're doing it. On that note, I want to first start saying thank you to Peggy McDonald from Halifax. So there were a lot of people from Halifax. So, and I think there have already been some informal discussions to say work with them and maybe put up a similar conference in 2 years' time in central Canada, wherever that is, but not west, not east, but we find a good spot that works for everyone. And because there's a huge community and there's more and more people, you know, coming to the fore with their disease. So let's try and put up another event. I'm not going to commit to it just yet. As I always say to Diana, first we need to get the sponsorships in, because I'm always very nervous about that. But I'm sure, you know, we had great partners in the pharmaceutical industry that I think we can make something happen for all of Canada in 2 years' time. So on that note, I want to thank you to Pfizer, Innomar, Ipsen, and Novartis for coming forward. They were approached to sponsor this, and they didn't even think twice. They jumped in and said, yes, Peter, we're here to support you, and Diana to put this event together. So I want to give also a warm applause to our sponsors. So then I want to thank the volunteers. I want to thank Terry, I want to thank Connie, and I thank Bill, Kathy, and Van for doing all the registration work and all the stuff that was happening over the next few days. Thank you very much. The specialists, they're not here today, but a lot of people from the pharma are telling me it's very rare that specialists stay for the whole day. So the fact that they were here, most of them were here for the whole day, is something to be very, you know, proud of. And we got great people here that came up. So thank you, specialists. I think I'm down to one person that I have to say thank you to, and that's Diana Badiou-Black. Diana, come to the stage. You know, Diana, I think you're a visionary to get this going. It's your energy and your drive. Don't look at me, look at me like that, because you made it happen. And initially when we started working on that, I was a bit nervous about the finances and the planning. But you say, no, it's gonna happen, and everything will be fine. We're gonna go for it. And it's sort of, I have to say, it's your energy and your drive that made it happen. So a very warm applause for Diana.
Okay, I wasn't supposed to be doing a speech, but anyways, it's not a speech. I know how I felt when I got told what I had, and I know how alone I felt for a long time. And I got really upset when I was told I couldn't meet somebody else just for a coffee, and that's what changed in me. And I think that's where my determination came from, because some people tell me I'm quite stubborn. But I want, and I am, and I'm trying to just make a difference in Canada for us not to be alone, and to get the knowledge out there and bring us all together, like just, not just the patients, but the doctors too, because we have so many different doctors, and we live in a society now where it's like we have to wait a year for a doctor's appointment, but yet we need that doctor's appointment done right away so we can keep on par and on top of our health. And I just think it's important that we're not alone. Like, we don't need to be alone. There's like, our stats are so out right now that when we finally do get the actual stats, and I'm hoping that happens within the next couple of years, I think we're going to have a lot of people's minds blown. I know I can walk down the street and now recognize an acromegaly person, like, just like that. And we don't need to be alone, and we need to tell our stories. So I will see you all in 2 years with hopefully a whole lot of awesome stories.
Okay, thanks everyone. This is it. Lunch is served.